Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey begins with a victory that already feels like a crime. A bard sings inside the palace of Ithaca, turning the Trojan War into a clean heroic legend. His song carries the story backward to the beach outside Troy, where the Greeks have apparently vanished and left behind an enormous wooden horse. One soldier, Sinon, remains behind to convince the Trojans that the horse is a sacred offering. The Trojans accept it. That is their final mistake. Hidden inside the structure, Odysseus and his warriors wait through suffocating heat and darkness. When night falls, they emerge, open the city gates, and allow the Greek army to enter. Troy is destroyed. Odysseus wins the war with one perfect lie. And then he spends the rest of the film discovering what that lie created. Years later, Ithaca is collapsing without its king. Penelope has waited nearly 20 years for her husband, but the powerful men of the island have decided waiting is no longer convenient. They occupy her palace, consume the kingdom's food, pressure her to remarry, and treat Odysseus's absence like an open job vacancy with unlimited catering. The most dangerous of them is Antinous. He does not simply want Penelope, he wants the throne, and Telemachus is standing in the way. Telemachus grew up with stories about a father he cannot remember. Everyone else assumes Odysseus is dead, but Telemachus refuses to accept it. He leaves Ithaca to search for evidence, visiting Menelaus and Helen in Sparta. What he finds is not a glorious memory of war. It is a household still carrying its damage. Helen has been turned into a symbol by generations of storytellers, while the people who actually survived Troy understand that the legend is cleaner than the truth. Far away, Odysseus is alive on the island of Ogygia. Calypso keeps him there in comfort, but comfort can still be a prison. She feeds him lotus flowers that blur memory and time. Days become years. The man who once controlled armies can barely control his own past. He repeatedly sees Athene, appearing as a silent young woman who follows him through his memories. She offers no magical rescue. She watches, she waits. She looks less like a goddess guiding him and more like a wound refusing to close. As Calypso pushes him to remember, the journey home unfolds in fragments. After leaving Troy, Odysseus and his crew enter a cave filled with sheep and supplies. The owner is Polyphemus, a gigantic one-eyed creature who seals the entrance and begins killing the trapped men. Odysseus blinds him and escapes by hiding the survivors beneath the Cyclops' flock. It should be a brilliant victory. Then Odysseus cannot resist announcing himself. Polyphemus calls upon Poseidon, and the sea becomes the enemy. Odysseus has defeated a monster, insulted it, supplied his name, and effectively submitted a complete revenge application. The surviving ships continue until they reach the land of the Laestrygonians. A child's scream summons enormous attackers from the forest. Ships are smashed. Men are pulled from the shore. The fleet that left Troy begins shrinking into a single exhausted crew. Hunger drives them to Circe's island. She offers the men food, then transforms them into pigs, not because she sees them as innocent victims, but because their behavior has already made the comparison convenient. Odysseus avoids the drugged meal and confronts her. He does not defeat Circe through strength. He persuades her to restore his men, and she tells him that the route home now leads through the dead. So the crew sails into a frozen, volcanic landscape where fire and ice meet. They perform a sacrifice and call spirits from the darkness. Agamemnon appears and describes returning from war only to be murdered in his own home. It is not exactly the motivational speech Odysseus needed before attempting the same trip. Sinon also appears. Odysseus finally faces the soldier whose life made the Trojan Horse possible. Sinon died so the lie could work, while Odysseus survived to become the hero in the song. The meeting turns the victory at Troy into a debt that cannot be paid with fame. Then the prophet Tiresias gives the crew a warning. Poseidon's anger will follow them, and when they reach the island of the sun god's sacred cattle, they must not touch them. This sounds simple. It is not. First, the ship passes the Sirens. The crew block their ears with wax while Odysseus is restrained, forcing him to hear the voices without steering the ship toward them. They survive the temptation only to encounter a sea monster that tears sailors from the deck. Every escape now costs people. Every decision leaves fewer men available for the next disaster. Eventually, the survivors reach the island containing the forbidden cattle. Storms trap them there. Supplies disappear. Starvation does what monsters could not. It turns a divine command into a menu suggestion. While Odysseus refuses to participate, his crew slaughter the cattle. The punishment arrives at sea. A catastrophic storm destroys the final ship. The men who survived Troy, giants, witches, ghosts, sirens, and sea monsters disappear beneath the waves. Odysseus alone washes onto Calypso's island. Now his imprisonment makes sense. Calypso believes he is not ready to return because home would force him to remember who he became during the war. But eventually she releases him. Odysseus surrenders himself to the sea and survives long enough to reach Ithaca. He returns not as a king, but as an anonymous, weathered stranger. Antinous has already sent assassins after Telemachus. At a temple, the attackers murder the prince's companions and close in on him. The disguised Odysseus intervenes and saves his son before revealing who he is. The reunion is quiet because neither man knows how to behave. Telemachus has spent his life imagining a legend. Odysseus has spent years trying to escape one. Together, they plan to reclaim the palace. Odysseus enters his own home disguised as a beggar. He sees what the suitors have done, but he also sees how easily violence could make him repeat the same pattern. The film keeps returning to Zeus's law. A host must protect a guest, because any stranger might be sacred. That law once held society together. Odysseus broke it at Troy by disguising soldiers as a gift. Now he uses the suitors' own arrogance to expose them. He provokes Antinous until the man strikes a guest inside the palace. The suitors have violated the same law they pretend gives them civilized authority. Before the final confrontation, Odysseus speaks with Penelope while still hiding his identity. He tells her the truth about Troy. The film returns to the city's destruction, but this time the heroic version disappears. Greek soldiers murder civilians, destroy sacred places, and drag a young priestess toward execution. She has the same face as the Athene who has haunted Odysseus throughout the journey. Athene was never simply protecting him. She was the face of someone he failed to protect. Odysseus understands that the Trojan horse did more than win a war. It turned hospitality into a weapon. It taught the world that gifts could contain armies and that trust was just another weakness to exploit. The mysterious raiders feared as the people from the sea are not some unknown civilization approaching from beyond the horizon. They are the returning Greeks. They are Odysseus and his men, seen from the shore of everyone they destroyed. Penelope announces a contest. Whoever can string Odysseus's bow and fire through a line of axe heads will prove worthy of her hand. The suitors fail one after another. Then the beggar takes the bow. He strings it. The arrow passes through. The doors close. Odysseus and Telemachus attack. The palace becomes the final battlefield, and the suitors discover that the dead king they were celebrating is both alive and extremely irritated. Antinous falls, the rebellion collapses, and Odysseus regains control of his home. But he does not reclaim the throne. He has returned to Ithaca, yet returning is not the same as becoming the man who left. Too many people died carrying him home. Too much violence followed the victory at Troy. Odysseus gives the kingdom to Telemachus, allowing the son who grew up without him to become the ruler Ithaca now needs. Then Odysseus leaves again. This time, Penelope goes with him. They sail west to honor the fallen and accept exile for the bloodshed inside the palace. Behind them, Telemachus inherits a kingdom standing at the edge of a collapsing age. Odysseus says their story will survive in songs because soon there may be no one left to write it. Cities can burn, kingdoms can disappear, writing can be lost, but a story can move from one voice to another for centuries, changing each time until guilt becomes heroism and disaster becomes legend. The bard's song finally continues. Odysseus reaches home, but Nolan's version refuses to treat homecoming as a reward. It is a reckoning. The greatest strategist of the war wins every battle except the one against the consequences of his own idea. A wooden horse opened the gates of Troy. It also opened the door to a world where nobody could trust a gift again.